Today's talk is titled Keeping Christmas All Year Long, to be delivered by Andy Feigin. Andy joined the UUCC in 2010 and with his wife Mimi became a full-time Cambrian in 2019. As he winds down his 50-year career as a stage manager, he is enjoying more free time to pursue his many interests, one of which is spiritual exploration, which is the motivation for this morning's talk. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you, Sue. So I don't actually celebrate Christmas. And of course, it's not Christmas now. We're a couple of months into the new year. But I appreciate that many of us hold deep and precious feelings related to that holiday. At this past December's morning of Christmas Eve service, Jan asked if I would read a short sermon by Henry Van Dyke, which she found in that collection of Caroline Kennedy Sue read from earlier. It seemed interesting, and I said sure. In preparing to read the piece, I discovered how just how profound it was and how it resonated with me. Then at a worship committee meeting, I offered to revisit, I gotta find the button here. I offered to revisit it for a Sunday talk, so here we are. I've done some research on the author, Henry Jackson Van Dyke, Jr. He was born on November 10th, 1852 in Germantown, Pennsylvania, so just before the Civil War. His father, Henry Jackson Van Dyke Sr., was a prominent Presbyterian clergyman. His mother's name was Henrietta Ashmead Van Dyke. Van Dyke earned a BA degree from Princeton University in 1873 and then joined the Princeton Theological Seminary. His careers spanned author, educator, Presbyterian clergyman, and diplomat. President Woodrow Wilson asked him to become the ambassador for America to the Netherlands and Luxembourg in 1913, just prior to the outbreak of World War I. He wrote Keeping Christmas back in 1888. By that time, he had already authored two books, The Reality of Religion and The Story of the Psalms. Keeping Christmas was published in a volume titled The Spirit of Christmas in 1905 and is described as a short Christmas sermon, Keeping Christmas. Here you see it listed in the table of contents of the book. In spite of my lack of Christmas spirit, I found so many thoughts Van Dyke expressed struck memories and connections for me that it might be worthwhile to share some of those with you, recognizing the universal and timeless meanings of Christmas. So I'll read through the short sermon, pausing at a number of places in order to share some of those connections. Here we go. Keeping Christmas by Henry Van Dyke. It is a good thing to observe Christmas Day, the mere marking of times and seasons when people agree to stop work and make merry together is a wise and wholesome custom. While stopping work, perhaps he's alluding to a Sabbath day. My first awareness of a Sabbath day came as a child when my parents took me to a performance of the musical Fiddler on the Roof. There's a lovely scene in that show where each of the Jewish households in Anatevka are depicted at sunset on a Friday evening, each family gathered around their supper table, lighting the Sabbath candles, and in the musical, singing their Sabbath prayers. It's a very peaceful scene, capturing both the serenity as they enter their day of rest, as well as the beauty of communally sharing in this tradition. I remember it vividly. The Ten Commandments, as well as books like this one, given to me by a friend, stress the importance of practicing a day of rest each week. The particular day doesn't actually matter. It's the choice to purposely detach from all the stuff of life so that for a day you can quiet your heart, mind, and soul and get back in touch with what's most fundamental to your existence. If you do this, it may help you to keep Christmas all year long. Back to Van Dyke. It helps one to feel the supremacy of the common life over the individual life. It reminds people to set their own little watch now and then by the great clock of humanity. Well, a while back, I gave a talk titled Letting Go. And in that talk, I spoke a bit about how we can benefit from embracing the knowledge that we have a finite time for this life. I cited Oliver Burkeman's book, 4,000 Weeks, and how it provides guidance on time management for mortals. It seems as if Van Dyke is saying to us that Christmas Day is a special day, and if we set our own little watch by the clock of humanity, we can all feel connected by a story of universal significance. And wouldn't it be great if we could make it a practice of feeling that connection every day, to feel the supremacy of the common life over the individual life, or as we UUs say it, affirm and promote the goal of world community. In doing that, we can keep Christmas all year long. Van Dyke goes on, but there is a better thing than the observance of Christmas Day, and that is keeping Christmas. And are you willing to forget what you have done for other people and to remember what other people have done for you? Back in January, the first reading Reverend Rod chose for his service was written by Ram Dass and Paul Gorman from their book, How Can I Help? Stories and Reflections on Service. They wrote, at a certain point, helper and helped simply begin to dissolve. What's real is the helping, the process in which we're all blessed according to our needs and our place at the moment. How much we can get back in giving, and how much we can offer in the way we receive. But even giving and receiving now seem artificial. Where does one begin the other end? They seem to be happening simultaneously. I love how Ram Dass and Paul Gorman and Reverend Rod are in harmony with Van Dyke and keeping Christmas. Next, Van Dyke asks, are you willing to ignore what the world owes you and to think what you owe the world? As I said in my introduction to this talk, Jan found this sermon in a collection of Christmas writings assembled by Caroline Kennedy, whose father was, of course, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States. My parents were tremendous fans of JFK. He represented their generation and all the aspirations of young adults of the day. I was only 7 years old when he gave his inaugural speech. I wonder if JFK might have been influenced by Van Dyke when he delivered his most memorable quote. And Randy, if you can unmute.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Those words engendered my first sense of citizenship, of civic duty, of being a part of a greater whole. If you keep in mind what you owe the world, then you are keeping Christmas. Van Dyke. To put your rights in the background and your duties in the middle distance, and your chances to do a little more than your duty in the foreground. In 1905, when this was published, the Presbyterian Church and the United States were both navigating a complex landscape of theological debate, societal change, mass immigration, institutional growth, and the beginnings of significant internal challenges that would face their futures. Sound familiar? Listen to Van Dyke's next words with this in mind. To see that your fellow men are just as real as you are, and to try to look behind their faces to their hearts, hungry for joy. To own that probably the only good reason for your existence is not what you are going to get out of life, but what you are going to give life. To close your book of complaints against the management of the universe and look around you for a place where you can sow a fresh word of happiness. Are you willing to do these things even for a day? Then you can keep Christmas. He continues, are you willing to stoop down and consider the needs and the desires of little children? There's a sign along the road to the cemetery where my parents and grandparents are buried that I have always found so moving. We never stand so tall as when we stoop to help a child. I've always been touched by this sentiment, but I'll admit the word stoop seemed a little odd. So when I read Van Dyke's version, are you willing to stoop down and consider the needs and the desires of little children? The similarities really struck me. Christmas, of course, celebrates birth and children. Children are at the center of its rituals. If you can consider the needs and desires of little children all year long, then you are keeping Christmas. Are you willing to remember the weakness and loneliness of people who are growing old? Many of us know loneliness. There was an elderly widower in my New York fellowship by the name of Donald Clark. There he is. He came to every Sunday service and sat alone in the same seat on the aisle, often with a stained shirt, badly in need of laundering. He often came to the discussion groups I led, and he'd often have strong opinions that would sometimes lead us astray, but he was really smart and passionate. One time, I was giving a talk like this one. I invited him to read one of the poems I had chosen. He gave a very moving reading, and his spirit seemed lifted. I liked Don, although he was not open to much in the way of socializing. Every Sunday, I made a point of greeting him and touching his shoulder. He recently passed away, but I like to think that those touches made a difference. Van Dyke, are you willing to stop asking how much your friends love and ask yourself whether you love them enough to bear in mind the things that other people have to bear on their hearts? We share joys and concerns every Sunday, and that's a beautiful way of doing just what Van Dyke is suggesting. We are often reminded that reaching out to others who are hurting is so important and so rewarding, and that is keeping Christmas. Are you willing to try to understand what those who live in the same house with you really want without waiting for them to tell you? Well, relationships are always complicated. Chances are we all keep some wants or needs to ourselves, even with the people we love most, the people with whom we are the closest. You can try and guess what those who live in the same house with you really want, but guessing can also lead to the wrong direction. In an ideal world, we would openly share those unspoken wants or needs and be open with accepting of them. Are you willing to trim your lamp so that it will give more light and less smoke? Are you willing to trim your lamp so that it will give more light and less smoke? Like the candles we light here in the sanctuary, the source of light we bring to others also needs to be trimmed, to be cared for. We need to maintain our compassionate selves in order to shine as brightly as possible, lighting the world for others with as little smoke, as much clarity as possible. More light and less smoke. When we do this, we are keeping Christmas. Continuing, to carry that lamp in front of you so that your shadow will fall behind you. Yeah, I had to think about that one. And it brought to mind this little figurine from my parents' home, which I keep on our dresser. I believe Van Dyke is asking us to lead with our light, our positive energy, and though we all see and feel darkness in the world, have that trail behind us. Don't lead with it. Lead with the light. Are you willing to make a grave for your ugly thoughts and a garden for your kindly feelings with the gate open? Keeping the gate open. Rumi says, the moment you accept what troubles you've been given, the door will open. Welcome difficulty as a familiar comrade. Joke with the torment brought by a friend. Sorrows are the rags of old clothes and jackets that serve to cover, then are taken off. That undressing and the beautiful naked body underneath is the sweetness that comes after grief. The hurt you embrace becomes joy. Van Dyke asks, are you willing to do these things even for a day? Then you can keep Christmas. Are you willing to believe that love is the strongest thing in the world, stronger than hate, stronger than evil, stronger than death, and that the blessed life which began in Bethlehem 1900 years ago is the image and brightness of the eternal love, then you can keep Christmas. And if you can keep it for a day, why not always? Now, Van Dyck could have stopped there. Would have been a good ending. But he adds one more line to his short sermon. But you can never keep it alone. Like so many of us, we yearn for community. After all, that's what brought me to Unitarian Universalism. People with whom I can share love, kindness, the joy of living, the sadnesses of life, and through Christmas, the celebration of birth of all kinds. From our first reading today, I repeat, the wisdom of the faiths belong to all of humankind, even the most rational among us, and throughout the liturgical year, deserves to be selectively reabsorbed. And from the second reading this morning, I repeat, if we are open to the gifts of understanding, hope, and faith in others and in the divine, the spirit of Christmas can help make real the way we want to live our lives. And if you can keep it for a day, why not always? But you can never keep it alone. Thanks.
That was wonderful, Andy. Thank you. And you are a wonderful gift to this community. Thank you very much for sharing.